Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner Stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I found a hidden Twitch stream on the dark web that only plays at midnight. The streamer's face looks exactly like mine. Okay, so I've never been the type of person to believe in conspiracy theories or get wrapped up in urban legends. I'm just your average 24-year-old dude who spends way too much time online. I work a boring IT job during the day, and by night, I'm either scrolling through Reddit, binging Netflix, or gaming with my friends on Discord. Nothing too crazy, but something happened last month that's made me question everything, and I mean everything. It all started on a random Tuesday night. I was in one of those late-night rabbit holes we all fall into, watching creepy YouTube videos about the dark web, true crime cases, and those cursed iceberg tier lists. You know the type, where the deeper you go, the weirder and darker the content gets. I just finished a video about unsolved mysteries when I came across a post on a forum. It wasn't Reddit though. It was one of those sketchy forums that your antivirus immediately tries to block when you click on it. The title of the post said, "Do not click this link unless you want to see your worst nightmare." Obviously, that's the kind of bait anyone with insomnia and a caffeine addiction is going to fall for. So, I clicked it. The page that loaded wasn't flashy or full of ads like those typical scam websites. It was just a plain black screen with one line of text at the top. Midnight stream, only for the brave. Below it, there was a single hyperlink in bright red text that just said, "Enter." I stared at it for a solid minute, debating whether I really wanted to keep going. But curiosity got the better of me. I mean, I've seen all kinds of messed up stuff online before. How bad could it be? When I clicked the link, my screen went completely black for about 5 seconds. Then, this grainy Twitch-style interface popped up, but it wasn't Twitch. There was no logo, no chat box, no follow account, just a basic video player with a timer counting down. It said 11:57:23. The weird part, it was live. Like this wasn't some pre-recorded video. Someone was actively streaming. There was no preview, no thumbnail, just the timer ticking down. Midnight was in less than 3 minutes. At this point, my stomach was doing somersaults, but I couldn't look away. I don't know if it was the ominous vibe of the website or the fact that I'd just binged 3 cans of Monster, but I felt like I needed to see what would happen when the timer hit 0. I grabbed my headphones, turned off the lights in my room, because obviously, that's the logical thing to do when something creepy is about to go down, and waited. The timer hit 0000, and the screen flickered like an old VHS tape. Then the stream began. At first, it was just static, like full-on white noise, with those little black and white dots swirling across the screen. But after a few seconds, the picture started to clear up, and I could make out a room. It looked weirdly familiar. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small bedroom with a desk, a gaming chair, and some LED lights on the walls. It could have been any streamer's setup. But the more I stared at it, the more I realized why it felt so familiar. It looked exactly like my room. I don't mean It kinda looked like my room. I mean, it was identical. Same desk, same cheap IKEA chair, same crumpled hoodie hanging off the back. Even the LED lights were set to the same color, this bluish purple I always use. My heart started racing as the camera panned across the room, and that's when I saw him. Sitting at the desk, facing the monitor, was me. No, I don't mean someone who looked like me. I mean, it was literally me. Same black hoodie I was wearing that night. Same messy brown hair. Even the same stupid zit on my chin that I'd been trying to pop for 3 days. He, or I, was just sitting there, typing on a keyboard like nothing was wrong. At this point, I was freaking out. I yanked off my headphones and spun around in my chair, half expecting to see a camera crew hiding behind me or some friend pulling a prank. But my room was empty. Just me, my desk, and my half-empty bag of Doritos. I put the headphones back on and stared at the screen, trying to convince myself it was some sort of deep fake. Like, maybe I'd been hacked and someone was using my webcam footage or something. But the longer I watched, the more I realized how impossible that was. The movements this guy was making, they weren't things you'd catch on a webcam. He was drumming his fingers on the desk in the same weird rhythm I do when I'm thinking. He scratched his neck exactly the way I always do when I'm stressed. He even grabbed the Doritos bag and started eating out of it the exact same way I had, licking his fingers between every bite. And then he turned to look at the camera. When I say it was like looking in a mirror, I mean it. He had my face, my eyes, my nervous half smile, but there was something off. His eyes were slightly wrong. They were too wide, like he was trying to imitate how a human would look when they're calm, but he wasn't quite pulling it off. And then he did something that sent a chill straight down my spine. He waved. It wasn't a normal wave. It was slow, deliberate, like he knew I was watching, like he was acknowledging me. I froze. My brain was going 1,000,000 miles an hour, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And then, as if things couldn't get any creepier, he spoke. Except it wasn't my voice. It was this distorted, almost mechanical version of my voice. Like someone had taken an audio clip of me talking and run it through one of those AI voice changes. "Hello, my name," he said, dragging out every syllable. "I've been waiting for you." The stream cut to static again, and the website crashed. Just like that, it was gone. But here's the thing. I checked the clock after the stream ended. It was still 11:59 p.m. I don't think I've ever felt that level of raw, paralyzing fear in my entire life. You know the kind where your body is completely frozen, but your mind is racing with every possible worst-case scenario. That's exactly where I was as I sat there staring at my monitor, which had gone back to my regular desktop screen like nothing happened. The weird part? My hands were shaking, but my mouse and keyboard were untouched. I hadn't closed the site. It just disappeared, like it didn't want me to linger. I immediately unplugged my webcam. I don't know why, but something about seeing myself, or whatever that thing was, on a stream made me feel like I was being watched. Every shadow in the room felt alive. Every tiny noise, my fan creaking, my fridge humming from the other side of the apartment, sounded like footsteps. I tried to brush it off, to convince myself it was just some elaborate prank, or maybe I was overtired and hallucinating. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I decided to check the website again. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, but when I tried typing the URL back into my browser, it was gone. Like Literally gone. The page didn't exist anymore. Not even the sketchy forum post where I found the link was there. It was like the entire thread had been wiped from existence. At that point, my heart was racing, but I needed answers. So, I did what any panicked person would do. I Googled it. I searched for anything about a dark web Twitch stream called Midnight Stream, but I came up with nothing. No Reddit threads, no YouTube videos, no shady forums. Zilch. It was like I'd stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to see. Something buried so deep that no one else had even talked about it. And then my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I'd left it on my desk, face down, but the vibration echoed in the dead silence of my room like a gunshot. When I flipped it over, I saw the notification. It was an Instagram DM from a burner account. The username was just a random jumble of letters and numbers, and the profile picture was one of those generic gray silhouettes. No followers, no posts, just one message. You're late. Check your door. I swear my stomach dropped straight into my shoes. My apartment isn't exactly in the safest part of town. I live on the outskirts of Chicago, in one of those cheap complexes where half the security cameras don't work, and the hallways always smell like stale beer. I don't know what possessed me, but I got up and crept to the door. I didn't open it though. I just peered through the peephole, and nothing. The hallway was empty, just the same dingy beige walls and flickering fluorescent light that's been broken since I moved in. But then, I noticed it. Something was wedged in the crack between my door and the frame. A piece of paper. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, trying to decide whether to grab it or just call the cops. But what was I gonna tell them? That I'd seen my doppelganger on a creepy live stream and someone left me a note? They'd probably think I was drunk or high. So, against my better judgment, I opened the door just a crack and snatched the paper. It wasn't handwritten like I expected. It was printed like someone had gone through the trouble of typing it out and formatting it to look like a ransom note from a bad movie. In big, bold letters, it said, "Midnight isn't over. Watch closely." Underneath the text was an address. I didn't recognize it, but it looked local. A street just a few blocks away. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the paper. This was beyond some online prank now. Someone had physically been at my door, and not 5 minutes ago. They knew where I lived. I ran back to my desk and locked every door and window in my apartment. I even checked the closets and under the bed, just to make sure I was alone. But as much as I wanted to forget about it, my curiosity got the better of me. I typed the address into Google Maps, and sure enough, it was real. It was a 24-hour McDonald's about 4 blocks away. You know, the kind of place where the ice cream machine is always broken and the parking lot looks like it belongs in the aftermath of a zombie apocalypse. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that this whole thing was some sick joke. Either way, I grabbed my hoodie, my keys, and a flashlight, and headed out. The streets were quiet. Too quiet. No cars, no people, just the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the cold night air. When I got to the McDonald's, the parking lot was completely empty. The neon open 24 hours sign flickered like it was on its last legs. But what really caught my attention was the car parked near the drive-thru. It was a beat-up old sedan, the kind you'd see in a junkyard, and its headlights were on, pointed directly at me. I froze. The driver's seat was empty, but the car was running. The windows were so tinted I couldn't see inside, but something about it felt wrong. My first instinct was to turn around and book it back home. But then I saw it. Another piece of paper taped to the hood of the car. I don't know how I convinced myself to walk up to it, but I did. The paper was just like the first one, printed in the same bold font. "You're not watching close enough." Before I could even process what that meant, my phone buzzed again. It was another Instagram DM, this time with a video attachment. My fingers were trembling so badly I could barely open it, but when I did, my stomach turned. It was footage of me, not from earlier, not from the stream. It was me, standing in the McDonald's parking lot at that very moment, staring at the paper. The angle was perfect, like it was being filmed from the car I was standing in front of. I whipped my head around, but the car was empty. I don't mean no driver, I mean completely empty. No seats, no dashboard, just this hollow shell of a vehicle. And then the headlights shut off. I don't remember much after that. I ran as fast as I could back to my apartment, not even caring if someone was following me. My lungs were on fire, my legs felt like jelly, but I didn't stop until I was back inside with the deadbolt locked. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, and when I looked at my phone, there was one final DM waiting for me. "Tomorrow, midnight. Don't disappoint me." I don't think I slept that night. Actually, I know I didn't. Every sound in my apartment felt amplified. The ticking of the clock on my wall sounded like a countdown to something inevitable. I kept checking the locks, pacing back and forth, and glancing at the windows like some kind of paranoid lunatic. Every time I thought about that last message, "Tomorrow, midnight, don't disappoint me," my stomach twisted into knots. The thing is, I wasn't just scared anymore. I was angry. Whoever was behind this had taken things way too far, hacking into my life, stalking me, filming me. It wasn't just some sick prank anymore. It felt personal. But as much as I wanted to fight back, to figure out who or what was doing this, I had no idea where to start. Every piece of evidence had been like smoke, impossible to hold on to, vanishing the second I tried to pin it down. When morning came, I was still wide awake. The sunlight streaming through my blinds felt almost insulting, like the world was mocking me for how much of a wreck I'd become in less than 24 hours. I checked my phone compulsively, half expecting another message, but there was nothing. Just the same cryptic DMS sitting in my inbox, like a bomb waiting to go off. I thought about calling the police, but I stopped myself. What would I even say? That someone had been watching me through my screen? That I'd found a ghost car in a McDonald's parking lot? I'd sound insane. And even if they did believe me, what could they do? Whoever or whatever this was, they weren't playing by normal rules. By the time night rolled around, I was a mess. I'd barricaded my door with my desk chair and a pile of books, like that was going to stop anything. I even turned off my Wi-Fi, thinking maybe it would disconnect me from whatever was happening. But deep down, I knew none of it mattered. Midnight was coming, and I didn't have a choice. When the clock hit 11:45 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a DM. It was a notification from an app I didn't even recognize. The icon was just a plain black circle, and the name was a string of random numbers. How it had gotten on my phone, I had no idea. The notification simply read, "It's time. Open the app." My hands were trembling as I clicked on it. The screen went black for a few seconds, before the familiar grainy live stream interface appeared. It was exactly like the one I'd seen the night before. No chat box, no usernames, just a timer counting down. But this time, it didn't start at 3 minutes. It was already at 0:00:0:03. Before I could process what was happening, the stream started. The picture was clearer now, almost high definition, but that didn't make it any less horrifying. It wasn't showing my room this time. It was showing someone else's. The setup was nearly identical to mine. A desk, a gaming chair, LED lights, but the details were off. The walls were painted a dark, sickly green, and the desk was cluttered with random items: an old rotary phone, a pair of rusted scissors, and what looked like a cracked Polaroid camera. Sitting at the desk, facing the camera, was another version of me. This version wasn't typing or eating chips like the last one. He was just staring into the camera with a blank expression, his head tilted slightly to the side. His eyes were glassy and unblinking, like a mannequin's, and his hands were folded neatly in front of him. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile either. It was the kind of grin you see in horror movies right before someone gets killed. Too wide, too forced, like his face was being stretched into it. He leaned closer to the camera and whispered something, but there was no sound. I turned up my volume, but the stream was completely silent. And then I saw it. Behind him, hanging on the wall, was a series of Polaroid pictures. My stomach dropped as I realized they weren't just random photos. They were of me. One was of me sitting at my desk. Another was of me walking to the McDonald's the night before. The last one was of me sleeping in my bed. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but my body felt glued to the chair. My phone buzzed again. Another DM, this time with a single link. The message said, "Come see for yourself." The link led to Google Maps, and when I clicked it, my blood ran cold. It was pointing to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, just a 10-minute drive away. The name of the location had been edited to read, Midnight Stream HQ. I don't know what possessed me to go. Maybe it was the sheer desperation to put an end to this nightmare. Or maybe I was just so far past terrified that I didn't care anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar from under my sink. I don't even know why I had it, and drove out there. The warehouse was exactly what you'd expect from a place like that. Rusty metal walls, shattered windows, and an eerie silence that made every little noise sound deafening. My car was the only one in the lot, but I could see faint light coming from inside the building. It wasn't flickering like a normal bulb though. It was steady, cold, and blue, like the glow of a computer screen. I forced myself to move, stepping over broken glass and debris as I made my way inside. The smell hit me first, a mixture of mildew, gasoline, and something metallic, like blood. My flashlight beam caught the edge of a staircase leading down into the basement, and that's when I heard it, the faint hum of static, just like the stream. Every instinct in my body told me to turn around and leave, but I kept going. The stairs creaked under my weight, and with every step, the static grew louder. By the time I reached the bottom, my ears were ringing. The basement was a nightmare. Monitors covered the walls, each one showing a different angle of my life. Me brushing my teeth, me eating dinner, me sitting at my desk. There was even one of me right now, standing in that very basement. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would burst. And then I saw him. The me from the stream was sitting in the corner, hunched over a computer. His movements were jerky, almost inhuman, as he typed furiously on the keyboard. When I shined my flashlight on him, he stopped and slowly turned to face me. His face. It wasn't my face anymore. It was distorted, like someone had stretched a mask of me over a skeleton that didn't quite fit. His mouth was too wide, his eyes too sunken, and his skin looked like it had been stapled onto his skull. He stood up, towering over me, and whispered in that same distorted voice, "You're late." Before I could react, the monitors all flickered to static. The room went pitch black, and I felt something cold and sharp press against my throat. I don't remember how long I stood there, frozen, with whatever cold, sharp object pressed against my throat. Seconds? Minutes. It felt like an eternity. My flashlight had fallen to the ground, the beam sputtering as if it were suffocating in the oppressive darkness. All I could hear was the static from the monitors, which had somehow grown louder, almost deafening. But beneath the static, there was something else, a sound like breathing, heavy, uneven breathing, as if something inhuman was struggling to mimic the rhythm of lungs. And then I heard the voice again, distorted and guttural, scraping against my eardrums. "You're not watching close enough." The pressure against my throat disappeared, and I stumbled backward, clutching at my neck, gasping for air. The lights flickered on for a split second, just long enough for me to catch a glimpse of the room I was in, and I wished they hadn't. The monitors were everywhere, lining every wall, stacked on metal shelves, like some sort of tech graveyard. Each screen flickered between distorted images of me. Not recordings, not photos, live footage. I saw myself standing in that very basement, disoriented and terrified, the camera angles shifting and zooming in on my face, like I was the star of some grotesque show. My reflection on the monitors was slightly delayed, like the feed was processing reality just a fraction of a second behind. And then I noticed something worse. Behind me, in the reflection of one of the screens, I saw it, the other me. He was standing just a few feet away, motionless, his head tilted at that unnatural angle, like before. Only this time, his face wasn't human anymore. His skin had warped further, sagging and splitting in places, revealing glistening, blackened muscle underneath. His eyes were hollow now, like two dark pits that stared straight into me, sucking the air out of my lungs. I spun around to face him, but the room was empty. Nothing. Just the hum of the monitors and the faint flicker of their blue glow. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it would shatter my ribs. I backed up against one of the walls, trying to steady my breathing, and that's when I saw the writing. It was scrawled across the wall in a reddish-brown substance I didn't want to think about. The words were jagged, uneven, like they'd been scratched into the surface with something sharp. Midnight never ends. I tried to process what that meant, but my thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing from somewhere above me. They weren't coming from the stairs, though. They were coming from the ceiling, as if something or someone was crawling on all fours across the rafters. My blood turned to ice as I craned my neck upward, the flashlight in my trembling hand barely illuminating the ceiling. That's when I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them, staring down at me through the cracks in the ceiling panels. They weren't human eyes. They were milky and lifeless, like glass marbles, each one fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. And then, as if responding to my flashlight, they blinked in unison. I heard a noise, a wet, slithering sound, like something massive shifting its weight. I bolted. I don't remember deciding to run. My legs just moved on their own, carrying me up the stairs 2 at a time. The monitors flickered wildly as I passed, the static and distorted images of myself merging into a chaotic blur. As I reached the top of the stairs, I felt something brush against my ankle, cold and clammy, like the hand of a corpse. I nearly tripped, but managed to catch myself, slamming the basement door shut behind me. The warehouse wasn't empty anymore. The room I'd entered was filled with mannequins. At least, I thought they were mannequins at first. They were all standing perfectly still, arranged in unnatural poses, some hunched over, some with their heads tilted backward, their arms bent at impossible angles. But the more I looked, the more I realized these weren't mannequins. Their faces were wrong, twisted and stretched like melted plastic. Their skin was pale and translucent, veins webbing just beneath the surface. And their eyes, oh God, their eyes were fixed directly on me. The door behind me rattled violently, as if something on the other side was trying to break through. The mannequins didn't move, but I swear I could hear them breathing, shallow and raspy, like they were waiting for something. My flashlight flickered again, casting distorted shadows across the room, and for a brief moment I thought I saw one of them twitch. The door behind me burst open, and I felt a rush of cold air as the static from the basement surged into the room. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I darted through the maze of mannequins, their lifeless faces blurring together as I sprinted toward what I hoped was an exit. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural growl coming from somewhere ahead of me. I froze, my flashlight beam trembling as I scanned the room. The mannequins were gone. The entire room was empty now, save for a single figure standing in the middle of the space. It was him. The doppelganger, or whatever it was no longer trying to look human. Its face was a grotesque parody of mine, stretched and distorted to the point where it barely resembled a face at all. Its mouth hung open, unnaturally wide, revealing a rows of jagged, blackened teeth. Its limbs were elongated and twisted, the skin stretched so tightly over its frame that it looked like it would tear at any moment. It raised one of its arms and pointed at me, its fingers impossibly long and ending in sharp, black claws. And then it spoke, in that same distorted, mechanical voice that sent chills down my spine. "You've been chosen. Midnight is your stage now." Before I could react, the monitors lining the walls came to life again, but this time they weren't showing me. They were showing you. Everyone. Every screen was filled with faces, thousands of them, watching, their expressions blank and unblinking. Some were familiar, people I'd passed on the street, co-workers, even my neighbors. Others were strangers, but all of them were watching me. The doppelganger stepped closer, its movements jerky and unnatural, and I realized what it was holding in its other hand. A camera. A large, old-fashioned camcorder, its lens trained directly on me. The red recording light burned like a tiny, sinister eye. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest, but the walls seemed to close in around me. There was no escape. The room itself felt alive, pulsing with the static from the monitors, the faces on the screens growing more and more distorted, their mouths opening in silent screams. The doppelganger raised the camera higher, and I heard its voice again, though it wasn't speaking to me this time. It was speaking to the audience, its tone dripping with malice. "He'll do. Let the show begin." The lights went out, and I felt something cold wrap around my ankles, dragging me into the darkness. I woke up to darkness, a suffocating inky black that pressed down on me like I was buried alive. My head throbbed, my limbs were heavy, and my throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming for hours. I tried to move, but my hands were tied behind my back, the rough bite of rope digging into my skin. My ankles were bound too, and every time I twisted or struggled, I felt something sticky and warm soaking into my clothes. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Coppery, metallic, unmistakable. Blood. It hung thick in the air, coating the back of my throat with every shaky breath. Somewhere nearby, I could hear the faint hum of static, the same oppressive sound that had followed me since this nightmare began. It was accompanied by something else now, though. A faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on glass. Then the lights flickered on, and I wished they hadn't. I was in a room I didn't recognize, but it felt like it had been waiting for me my whole life. The walls were lined with cameras, hundreds of them, all pointed directly at me. They ranged from sleek, modern security cameras to bulky, outdated camcorders, their lenses staring at me like unblinking eyes. Each one had a red recording light, glowing steadily, casting eerie dots of light that danced across the walls. But that wasn't the worst part. The floor was covered in blood. Thick, sticky pools of it spread out like a grotesque mural, seeping into the cracks between the tiles. Scattered among the gore were pieces, human pieces, a hand here, a severed foot there, faces, faceless faces, staring blankly at me from the floor, their features erased like someone had smeared wet paint across them. The walls were covered in Polaroid photos, just like the ones I'd seen before. But these were different. These weren't just pictures of me. They were pictures of everyone I knew. My coworkers, my neighbors, my mom, my best friend from high school, even strangers I'd passed on the street once or twice. Each photo was pinned to the wall with something sharp, a knife, a nail, a shard of glass, and their faces were all scratched out. Some were so shredded that the paper hung in ribbons, the destruction almost gleeful. I wanted to vomit, to scream, to wake up from this nightmare, but all I could do was sit there, bound and helpless, as the tapping sound grew louder. It was coming from the corner of the room. I turned my head, my neck stiff and aching, and saw him. The doppelganger, or whatever it was crouched there, hunched over like a predator ready to pounce. His head jerked upward the moment my eyes landed on him, and I felt my stomach drop. His face, or what was left of it, was worse than before. His skin was stretched so tightly that it looked like it would snap at any second, and his mouth hung open, impossibly wide, revealing a void of jagged teeth that spiraled down into darkness. His eyes, they weren't just hollow anymore. They were moving, filled with writhing black worms that crawled and squirmed in the empty sockets. He grinned, or at least I think he did, and began dragging something toward me. It screeched against the floor, a sound so sharp it made my teeth ache. It was a chair, a simple wooden chair, old and splintered, but strapped to it was something that made my blood run cold. A body. The person was slumped over, head tilted at an unnatural angle, their chest covered in blood. Their face was shredded like the Polaroids on the wall, completely unrecognizable. But their clothes, the hoodie, the jeans, even the scuffed up sneakers, they were mine. I couldn't process what I was seeing. It was me, or at least it had been me. My mind felt like it was tearing itself apart, trying to reconcile what was happening. The doppelganger dragged the chair into the center of the room, positioning it directly under the glare of the cameras. Then he stepped back, tilting his head to admire his work, like a twisted artist evaluating a masterpiece. The tapping started again, louder this time, echoing through the room like a countdown. It wasn't coming from him anymore, though. It was coming from the cameras. The lenses began to move, focusing, zooming in and out, each one jittering and clicking as if they were alive. The red recording lights grew brighter, pulsating in unison like a heartbeat. And then the static came. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a force, pressing against me, vibrating in my skull, filling the room with its suffocating presence. The doppelganger stepped forward, his jerky, unnatural movements making my skin crawl. He held something in his hand now, a scalpel, its blade gleaming under the flickering lights. He didn't speak, but I heard his voice anyway, loud and clear, echoing inside my head like it was coming from my own thoughts. Midnight is forever. You are the star. The world is watching. The cameras zoomed in on me, their movements frantic, almost desperate, as if they couldn't get enough of whatever horror was about to unfold. The doppelganger raised the scalpel, his distorted grin growing wider and wider until it looked like his face would split in two. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end, but it didn't come. When I opened my eyes again, the room was empty. The cameras were gone, the blood was gone, even the walls themselves were gone. I was sitting in my bedroom, tied to my chair, staring at my computer screen. The Twitch-like interface was back, and on the stream, I saw myself, unbound, unharmed, sitting at my desk, like nothing had happened. But something was wrong. The me on the screen wasn't moving. He was just sitting there, staring into the camera, his face blank and lifeless. And then he smiled. The stream cut to black, and my computer shut itself off. My phone buzzed again. Another DM. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a live feed. The video showed my apartment, my actual apartment, from the perspective of a hidden camera. It cycled through different angles, the kitchen, the bathroom, even the closet. It ended on a shot of my bedroom, where I was sitting. But in the video, I wasn't alone. Standing behind me, just out of reach, was the doppelganger. His face was even worse now, a mass of rotting flesh and exposed bone, his hollow eyes dripping with black ichor, his mouth opened wide, stretching far beyond what should have been possible. And in that moment, the video froze. The final frame was a close-up of his face, grinning so wide it made my stomach churn, with one word scrolled across the screen in blood-red text: "Midnight never ends." I haven't left my apartment since. Every night at midnight, the stream starts again, whether I want it to or not. It doesn't matter if I turn off my computer, unplug the Wi-Fi, or even leave the room. The feed always finds me, showing the same twisted figure and the same grotesque smile. I don't know how long I can take this. I don't know what they want from me. All I know is I'm not the only one. Check your screens at midnight. You might be next. I rented a yacht from a dark web auction. Halfway through the trip, I found human teeth in the engine room. All right, let me start by saying that I'm not some kind of thrill seeker or adrenaline junkie. I'm just a regular guy with a boring life who occasionally makes bad decisions when I get too curious for my own good. This is one of those bad decisions. It's the kind of thing that makes you question your own sanity after it's over. And if I'm being honest, I still don't know how I made it out in one piece. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, I'm 27, living in Miami. I work remotely as a freelance designer, which basically means I sit at my computer all day pretending to be productive, while actually spiraling down random internet rabbit holes. If you've ever had a job where you work from home, you know exactly what I'm talking about. 1 minute, you're researching font pairings for a client's logo, and the next, you're 6 tabs deep into conspiracy theories about Bigfoot or ancient aliens. It's a vibe. It was during one of those late-night boredom binges that I came across a Reddit thread about the dark web. I'd always thought the dark web was this overblown urban legend, but the more I read, the more intrigued I got. People on the thread were sharing screenshots of these so-called auctions where you could bid on anything from rare antiques to straight-up illegal stuff. Now, before you judge me, let me clarify. I wasn't looking to buy anything illegal. I just wanted to see if this whole dark web auction thing was real. You know, for the experience. I found a link buried in one of the comments, which led to another link, and then another. By the time I got to the actual site, it felt like I was in way too deep to back out. The homepage was nothing fancy, just a black screen with bold white text that said, "Enter at your own risk." Classic. The listings were wild. There were old, grainy photos of creepy dolls, supposedly haunted jewelry, jars of unidentified liquids, and even passports with fake identities. It felt like I was browsing the clearance section of a haunted thrift store. And then I saw it. Private luxury yacht, 1 week rental, no questions asked. The listing stood out because it didn't fit with the rest of the junk. There were actual high-quality photos of this pristine white yacht docked in some tropical paradise. The description said it was fully stocked and perfect for parties or private getaways. Starting bid, $500. I couldn't believe it. A yacht for $500. I've lived in Miami long enough to know that renting one of these for a day costs thousands. At first, I thought it was a scam, like maybe they'd lure people in with this fake yacht deal and then jack their credit card info or something. But there was a list of past auction winners, and they all had reviews. Stuff like legit experience and once-in-a-lifetime deal. The more I read, the more I started to think that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as sketchy as it seemed. And that's when I made my first mistake. I placed a bid. I wasn't expecting to win. I figured someone else would outbid me within minutes, and that would be the end of it. But when I checked my email the next morning, I had a new message in my inbox. The subject line just said, "Congratulations." I opened the email, and my heart started racing. It read, "You are the winner of the auction for private luxury yacht. Payment instructions and pickup details will follow shortly." I was half excited, half terrified. I mean, I'd just won a freaking yacht rental for $600. That's the kind of thing you joke about in group chats, not something that actually happens. But then reality set in. Was this legit? Would I get scammed? Would I even survive whatever was waiting for me? An hour later, I got the follow-up email. It was short and to the point. Pickup location, redacted marina, Key West, Florida time, 8 a.m., Thursday. Payment method, cash on delivery. Contact, anonymous number. There were no contracts, no waivers, no confirmation of who I even was. Just a date, a time, and an address. If you're thinking, this sounds shady as hell, then congrats. You're way smarter than I was in that moment. But here's the thing. When you're curious and stupid and a little bit bored with life, your brain can convince you that something shady is just an adventure. So that Thursday, I packed a bag, gassed up my car, and drove 3 hours down to Key West. The marina was nicer than I expected. It wasn't some backwater pier with rusted fishing boats. It was filled with million-dollar yachts and shiny sailboats. For a second, I thought I'd gotten the address wrong. I mean, this place looked like it catered to rich retirees, not sketchy, dark web auctions. I called the number in the email, and within 5 minutes, this guy showed up. And when I say guy, I mean he looked more like a middle school janitor who'd just rolled out of bed. He was wearing a faded black hoodie with the hood up, and his face was partially hidden by oversized sunglasses. He didn't say much, just handed me a key card and pointed to one of the slips. "That's your boat," he said, his voice low and scratchy. "Payment?" I held out the cash, but he just shook his head. "It's already been handled." "Handled by who?" I asked. He gave me this weird half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't worry about it. Enjoy your trip." And just like that, he walked off. At that point, I should have trusted my gut and left. I should have gotten in my car, driven home, and called it a day. But the yacht was right there. And it was beautiful. I'm talking sleek white finish, tinted windows, a hot tub on the deck. It looked like something straight out of a music video. Against my better judgment, I stepped on board. When I stepped onto the yacht, everything was quiet. Too quiet. There was no hum of the marina, no chatter from other boat owners, nothing. Just the faint sound of water lapping against the hull. I told myself it was normal, that maybe people weren't early risers or something, but there was this tension in the air that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Inside, the yacht was even more stunning than it looked in the photos. Polished floors, leather couches, a kitchen that looked like it had never been touched. Everything smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, which was oddly comforting. The bar was fully stocked with expensive-looking liquor, and the fridge was packed with food, steaks, lobster tails, even tiny glass bottles of imported water. It felt like I'd walked into a billionaire's vacation home, but there was something off. I couldn't explain it, but the place felt too perfect, like it had been staged, like whoever stocked the fridge and set up the bar didn't actually live here or use any of it. They just wanted it to look convincing. Still, I brushed it off. I mean, I'd just scored a luxury yacht for $600. Who was I to complain? The first 2 days were unreal. I sailed out into open water, cracked open some beers, and just existed. For the first time in forever, I felt like I'd won at life. I spent the days sunbathing on the deck, taking selfies to post on Instagram, with vague captions like "living," and blasting music loud enough to make the dolphins hate me. At night, I'd lie out under the stars, feeling like the main character in some indie movie. It was all smooth sailing, literally, until the third day. That's when things started to get weird. It began with the radio. I was in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest shore, but the yacht's built-in radio suddenly crackled to life. At first, I thought it was just static, but then I realized there was a pattern to it. Short bursts, then long ones, like Morse code. I didn't know Morse code, but I could tell it wasn't random. It sounded like a message. I shut the radio off and tried to ignore it, but that creeping sense of unease had already started to set in. Then there was the GPS. The yacht had this fancy touchscreen system that showed your exact location on a map. I'd been keeping an eye on it, mostly just to make sure I wasn't drifting too far. But now it was glitching. 1 minute, it showed me off the coast of Key West. The next, it showed me in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And then it just went blank. I told myself it was just a technical issue. Boats weren't my thing, but I figured even expensive ones had their quirks. Still, the longer I sat there, staring at that blank screen, the more I started to feel like I wasn't alone, like I was being watched. Later that evening, I went to grab a drink from the bar, and that's when I noticed it. One of the bottles, a dark green one with no label, was open. The thing is, I hadn't touched it. I was sticking to beer and didn't even bother with the liquor. But now there was this bottle sitting there, slightly tilted, with a faint ring of liquid at its base. I checked the fridge next. One of the steaks was gone. And no, I didn't eat it. I'd been living off chips and sandwiches because, let's face it, cooking wasn't high on my priority list. But now there was this empty space in the fridge where a steak had been, and a single bloody streak on the shelf. At this point, I was officially freaked out. I did a full sweep of the yacht, checking every room, every closet, even under the beds. Nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was on board with me. That night, I locked myself in the main bedroom. I figured if someone was messing with me, I'd hear them try to get in. I left the lights on, grabbed a kitchen knife, and sat on the bed scrolling through my phone. But here's the thing. My phone wasn't working. I had full bars and Wi-Fi, but every app I opened froze. Even my camera wouldn't load. I tried calling someone, anyone, but the calls wouldn't go through. It was like my phone was bricked. And then, just as I was about to give up and try to sleep, I heard it. Footsteps. They were faint, barely audible over the sound of the water, but they were definitely there. Slow, deliberate, coming from the deck above me. I held my breath, gripping the knife so hard my hand started to cramp. The footsteps stopped, and for a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then, a single knock. It wasn't on the bedroom door. It was coming from the window. The thing is, the window was on the outside of the yacht, and there was no deck out there, just open air and water. There was no way someone could be standing there. But the knock came again, louder this time. I didn't dare move. I just sat there, staring at the window, half expecting a face to press against the glass. But nothing happened. After what felt like an eternity, the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse, like whatever was out there was waiting for me to make the next move. The next morning, I decided I'd had enough. I was going to turn the yacht around and head back to the marina. Screw the rest of the week. Whatever I'd paid, it wasn't worth this. But when I tried to start the engine, nothing happened. The dashboard lit up with error messages, the most prominent one being system locked. I went down to the engine room to see if I could figure out what was wrong. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe a loose wire or something, but what I found made my blood run cold. The engine room was trashed. Wires were ripped out, tools were scattered across the floor, and there were deep scratches along the walls, like someone had taken a knife to the metal. But the worst part, the box. Tucked behind one of the pipes was a small metal box, old and rusted, with a padlock that looked like it had been smashed open. Inside were human teeth, dozens of them, some yellowed with age, others still fresh, with bits of flesh and blood clinging to the roots. I gagged and nearly dropped the box. That's when I noticed the lid. Someone had scratched a single word into the metal. Payment. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that box. It felt like the air in the room had been sucked out, leaving me in this suffocating silence. My brain was screaming at me to leave, to get off the yacht and never look back, but my body wouldn't move. And then I heard it again. Footsteps. This time, they were coming from directly above me. When I finally made it back up to the deck, the yacht was empty, or at least it looked empty. But there were these faint, wet footprints leading from the side of the boat to the bar. I followed them, knife still in hand, but the trail stopped abruptly at the edge of the deck, like whoever or whatever had been there just vanished. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard whispers, not words, just sounds, like someone breathing directly into my ear. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going to take the lifeboat and get the hell out of there. I didn't care where I ended up. Anywhere was better than here. When dawn finally crept in, I was still sitting in the corner of the main cabin, clutching the kitchen knife, like it was the only thing keeping me alive. My eyes burned from staying open all night, and my body was stiff from sitting on the coal floor. I was too afraid to move, too afraid to make a sound. Every few minutes, I thought I heard something, a faint creak, the groan of the hull shifting against the waves, or maybe just my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I knew I had to leave. Whatever was happening on this yacht, it was far beyond my ability to deal with. But leaving wasn't as simple as just stepping off and walking away. I was in the middle of nowhere, miles from the coast, with no functioning engine and no way to call for help. The only option was the lifeboat, a small, inflatable raft stowed on the back deck. I'd seen it during my initial exploration of the yacht, but at the time, I didn't think I'd actually need it. Now, it was my only hope. Before I could leave, I needed to pack supplies. I didn't know how far I'd drift or how long I'd be out there, so I grabbed whatever I could: bottled water, a few bags of chips, a first aid kit. I even grabbed one of the bottles of liquor from the bar, not because I thought I'd need it, but because having something sharp and glass felt better than nothing. The knife stayed in my hand the entire time. I didn't care how paranoid I looked. As I moved around the yacht, I kept expecting something to jump out at me. A figure in the shadows, a hand grabbing my ankle from under the table. But nothing happened. The yacht was eerily still, as if it were holding its breath. The only sound was the faint creak of the floorboards under my feet. I was halfway through packing when I noticed something strange. On the wall near the stairs leading below deck, there were scratches. At first, I thought it was just damage from years of use, but as I got closer, I realized they weren't random. They were deliberate. Someone, or something, had scratched words into the wall. "I see you." My blood ran cold. The words weren't deep or obvious. They were faint, almost like they'd been scratched with a fingernail. The letters were uneven, jagged, and desperate. I backed away from the wall, suddenly feeling like I was being watched again. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like my chest was going to explode. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The sound wouldn't come out. I should have gone straight to the lifeboat, but something stopped me. Call it morbid curiosity or just plain stupidity, but I felt compelled to check below deck one last time. Maybe it was the thought of someone or something still being down there. Maybe I just needed to know what I was running from. I grabbed a flashlight from the supply closet, took a deep breath, and headed down the stairs. The air below deck was heavier, almost suffocating. The faint lemon scent that had filled the yacht was gone, replaced by something metallic and sour. The engine room was at the far end of the hallway, past the guest bedroom and the storage closet. I kept my footsteps light, the knife in one hand and the flashlight in the other. As I approached the guest bedroom, I noticed the door was ajar. I hadn't left it like that. My heart sank. The small window inside cast a faint beam of light across the room, illuminating the bed and the dresser. Everything looked normal at first glance, but then I saw the mirror. The mirror was fogged up, as if someone had been breathing on it. And in the condensation, there were words. "Leave." I staggered back, slamming into the wall. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows that danced across the room. I didn't even think about checking the closet or under the bed. I just ran straight to the engine room, desperate to grab anything useful and get the hell out of there. The engine room was worse than I remembered. The mess I'd seen before, wires ripped out, tools scattered across the floor, was only the surface. Now the walls were smeared with something dark and sticky. Blood? Oil? I didn't want to know. The box of teeth was still there, but now it was open, its contents spilled across the floor. Teeth of all shapes and sizes, some jagged, some perfectly straight, stared back at me like a nightmare come to life. And then I saw it, the captain's log. It was an old, leather-bound journal, sitting on a shelf above the engine. The edges were frayed, and the cover was stained with what looked like water damage, or worse. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Most of the pages were unreadable, the ink smudged and blurred, but a few lines stood out. Payment must be made. They come at night. Do not sail past the third night. The last entry was dated only a week ago. It was short, just 4 words written in a shaky hand. The captain is dead. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the journal. My mind was racing, trying to piece everything together. Who was the captain? What payment? None of it made any sense, but one thing was clear. I wasn't alone on this yacht. Something, or someone, was here, and they weren't going to let me leave without a fight. As I turned to leave, I heard it again. The footsteps. This time, they were louder, closer, echoing down the hallway outside the engine room. They weren't slow or deliberate anymore. They were frantic, like someone was running. I froze, gripping the knife so tightly my knuckles turned white. The footsteps stopped just outside the engine room door. For a moment, there was silence. And then, a voice. Low, guttural, and completely inhuman. Payment! I don't remember running. I don't remember how I made it back to the main deck, or how I managed to lower the lifeboat into the water without falling in. All I know is that I didn't look back. I couldn't. I could feel eyes on me, watching from the shadows of the yacht, but I didn't dare turn around. As I paddled away, the yacht grew smaller and smaller in the distance. Its lights flickered, casting eerie reflections on the water. And then, just as it disappeared from view, I heard it one last time. A single knock, faint but unmistakable, echoing across the water. I don't know what I rented. I don't know who or what was on that yacht. But one thing's for sure. I'll never set foot on a boat again. I paddled for hours. My arms felt like lead. My throat was dry, and every splash of the oars against the water felt deafening in the stillness around me. The ocean was unnervingly calm, like a sheet of black glass stretching into infinity. It felt as though I wasn't moving at all, no matter how hard I rowed. My eyes kept darting back to the horizon, expecting to see the yacht growing closer, as if it were following me It never did. At least, not that I could see. The sun was starting to rise when I noticed something strange. The water beneath me wasn't clear. Instead, it had taken on this murky, reddish tint, like someone had spilled gallons of rust-colored dye into the ocean. I leaned over the side of the lifeboat to get a better look, and that's when I saw them. Teeth, hundreds of them, floating just beneath the surface, like some kind of nightmarish snow globe. They weren't loose either. They were still embedded in bits of flesh and bone, jaws, skulls, hands. The water was littered with pieces of human remains, bobbing gently in the current. My stomach churned, and I barely managed to keep myself from throwing up. I told myself to keep rowing, to focus on the horizon, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop looking at the water. It wasn't just the bones, it was the movement. They weren't floating randomly. They were circling me, slowly, like predators sizing up their prey. That's when I heard it, a soft, rhythmic thudding sound, coming from somewhere far off. At first, I thought it was my heartbeat echoing in my ears, but it grew louder, steadier, until it was unmistakable. It sounded like drums, deep, resonant, and hypnotic, like something you'd hear in an ancient ritual. I had no idea where it was coming from. The sound seemed to travel through the water itself, vibrating up through the lifeboat and into my chest. Then, over the sound of the drums, came the whispering. It was faint at first, barely audible over the thudding, but it grew louder with each passing second. It wasn't just one voice. It was dozens, maybe hundreds, all overlapping and blending together. Men, women, children. Some spoke in languages I didn't recognize, while others hissed words that sent shivers down my spine. You took the captain's place. The debt is yours now. You can't run from him. I tried to block it out, covering my ears and shutting my eyes tight, but it didn't help. The voices weren't coming from outside. They were inside my head, worming their way into my thoughts like maggots burrowing into rotten flesh. When I opened my eyes, the horizon was gone. The sun, the sky, even the faint glow of dawn, everything had vanished. I was surrounded by darkness, a thick, impenetrable blackness that felt alive. The water beneath me was still glowing red, casting an eerie light that made the floating remains look even more grotesque. And then, in the distance, I saw it. The yacht. It was impossible. I'd been rowing away for hours. There was no way I could have circled back, but there it was, looming out of the darkness like some kind of monstrous shadow. Its lights were flickering erratically, and the air around it seemed to shimmer, like heat rising off asphalt. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. All I could do was watch as the yacht slowly drifted closer, the faint sound of those infernal drums growing louder with every passing second. I don't know what possessed me to climb back aboard. Maybe it was the whispers, or the drums, or some unseen force pulling me in like a riptide. Or maybe it was the realization that there was nowhere else to go. The ocean had swallowed everything: light, direction, reality itself. The lifeboat felt like a coffin, and the yacht was the only thing left in this endless void. The moment I stepped onto the deck, the air changed. It was thick and humid, clinging to my skin like a second layer. The scent of lemon cleaner was gone, replaced by the coppery tang of blood and decay. The deck was slick underfoot, coated in a thin layer of what I could only describe as slime. The whispers were louder now, coming from all directions. They didn't sound angry or malicious anymore. They sounded excited, hungry. I didn't want to go below deck, but something was drawing me there. The staircase yawned open like the mouth of a beast, and I felt myself being pulled toward it, my legs moving on their own. The knife was still in my hand, but it felt useless, like a toy. The hallway below deck was unrecognizable. The walls were warped and twisted, covered in deep scratches and smeared with handprints. The blood, or whatever it was still wet, dripping down the walls in thick, glistening trails. The air was alive with whispers, so loud now that they drowned out my own thoughts. As I moved deeper into the yacht, I realized the layout had changed. The rooms were no longer where they should have been, and the hallway seemed to stretch on forever, tilting at odd angles like a funhouse. The doors were wrong too. Some were too small to crawl through, while others were massive, towering over me like the gates to some ancient tomb. I stopped in front of one door that was slightly ajar. The light spilling out from inside was a sickly green, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed like living things. I pushed the door open, and what I saw inside will haunt me for the rest of my life. The room was filled with bodies. They were hanging from the ceiling, their limbs bound with thick ropes that dug deep into their flesh. Their faces were covered with burlap sacks, but I could see the blood soaking through, dripping onto the floor in steady, rhythmic drops. Beneath them, the floor was covered in teeth. Hundreds, no, thousands of teeth, piled up like grains of sand on a beach. As I stepped into the room, the burlap sacks turned toward me, as if the bodies were watching me. And then, one by one, the sacks began to fall, revealing what was underneath. They weren't faces. They were skulls, stripped of flesh, their empty sockets staring into mine. Their jaws opened and closed in unison, grinding against each other to form a single, guttural word. Payment. I ran. I don't know how I found my way back to the main deck, but I ran faster than I thought possible, tripping and stumbling over the warped floor. The whispers were screaming now, a deafening cacophony that made my ears ring. When I finally made it back outside, the yacht was no longer surrounded by water. Instead, it was floating in a sea of blood and bones, stretching out as far as the eye could see. The sky above was a deep, swirling red, and in the distance, I could see shapes moving, massive, hulking shadows that made the yacht feel like a toy in comparison. I didn't stop to think. I climbed back into the lifeboat, cut the ropes, and started paddling. I didn't care where I went, as long as it was away from that cursed yacht. When I finally looked back, the yacht was gone. The sea was calm again, and the sun was rising, painting the horizon in shades of pink and orange. But the peace didn't last long. In the distance, I heard it again. The drums. They were getting closer. The sea was quiet. Too quiet. The lifeboat rocked gently as I sat there, paddling aimlessly. The sunrise had vanished as quickly as it appeared, swallowed up by a sky that had turned sickly gray, like the world was caught in some limbo between night and day. I tried to convince myself it was over, that I'd escaped, but deep down, I knew better. The drums were getting louder. I paddled harder, my arms screaming with each stroke. I wasn't heading anywhere in particular. There was no land in sight, no sign of anything except the endless expanse of water. But staying still wasn't an option. Not with the drums closing in. Not with that feeling of something enormous looming just out of view, watching me. Then the water began to ripple. It started small, like the kind of gentle waves you'd see from a passing boat. But there was no boat, and the ripples grew larger, more violent, until the lifeboat was rocking so hard I thought it might flip. I looked down, and for the first time, I saw what was beneath me. The ocean wasn't water anymore. It was eyes, thousands of them, staring up at me through the rippling surface. They weren't human eyes. They were too large, too empty, and they glowed faintly, like embers in a dying fire. Some blinked slowly, others stayed wide open, unblinking, as if they were waiting for something. For me. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. I gripped the sides of the lifeboat, my knuckles white, as the water, no, the eyes, began to rise. The lifeboat was lifted into the air, carried by a massive swell of those unblinking eyes. They weren't just watching anymore. They were moving, shifting under the surface, forming shapes. I saw hands clawing their way out of the water, skeletal and dripping, their fingers impossibly long. Faces began to rise next, pale and featureless, mouths gaping open in silent screams. One of the hands reached for the lifeboat, its bony fingers wrapping around the edge. I hacked at it with the knife, the blade slicing clean through, but the hand didn't fall. It just melted back into the water, reforming a few feet away. I paddled harder, though I knew it was useless. The lifeboat wasn't moving. The eyes, the hands, the faces, they were pulling me back, dragging me towards something massive on the horizon. At first, I thought it was another yacht, but as it grew closer, I realized it wasn't a ship at all. It was a figure, the captain. He, or it, towered over the ocean, his body made of the same swirling blackness that had engulfed the yacht. His face, or what passed for one, was a blank void, featureless except for a gaping mouth filled with jagged teeth. Teeth like the ones I'd found in the engine room. Teeth that now hung around his neck in a grotesque necklace, strung together by sinew and wire. The captain didn't walk. He didn't swim. He simply was, moving closer without moving at all. The water beneath him didn't ripple. It vanished, as if the ocean itself was retreating from his presence. And then he spoke. His voice wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, a vibration deep in my chest that made my bones ache and my teeth chatter. The words didn't come from his mouth. They came from everywhere, all at once. The debt must be paid. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The knife slipped from my hand, clattering against the bottom of the lifeboat. My body felt frozen, paralyzed by the sheer weight of his presence. You took the deal. You took the captain's place. Now you belong to me. The lifeboat started to sink, not fast, but slow and deliberate, like something was pulling it under. The water, or whatever it was, rose around my ankles, cold and sticky, seeping into my clothes. I tried to climb out, but there was nowhere to go. The ocean of eyes was everywhere, their glowing stares piercing through me, rooting me in place. The captain raised one of his hands, and for the first time, I saw the full extent of him. His fingers weren't fingers. They were jagged, rusted hooks, tangled with frayed ropes and chains. He reached toward me, and I knew deep down that this was it. There was no escaping him, no escaping the yacht, no escaping the payment. But then I remembered the knife. My hands were shaking so badly, it took me 3 tries to pick it up. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even think it would work. But the instinct to fight back was stronger than my fear. As the captain's hooked fingers closed in, I lunged forward and stabbed the blade into his hand. The effect was immediate. The captain let out a deafening roar, the sound vibrating through the air and water like an earthquake. His hand recoiled, dark liquid oozing from the wound. The eyes beneath the lifeboat blinked in unison, their glow flickering like dying candles. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I paddled with everything I had, ignoring the ache in my arms and the burning in my lungs. The captain's roar faded into the distance, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I paddled until the water turned clear again, until the eyes were gone, until the sky turned blue. When I finally saw land, I almost didn't believe it. My hands were blistered and bleeding, my clothes soaked, but I didn't care. I dragged the lifeboat onto the beach and collapsed onto the sand, my body shaking with exhaustion. I don't know how long I lay there, staring up at the sky. Hours, maybe. The beach was empty, the only sound the gentle crash of the waves. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped out of a nightmare and into a dream. But when I sat up, I saw it. A single tooth, half buried in the sand, glinting in the sunlight. I don't know how I made it back to civilization. The next few days were a blur of confused stares, awkward questions, and sleepless nights. I told the Coast Guard the yacht had malfunctioned and sank, and they didn't press me for details. I didn't tell them about the captain, about the eyes, about the payment. I've tried to move on, but I can't. The nightmares won't stop. Every night, I hear the drums, the whispers, the captain's voice. Every night, I wake up with the taste of salt and blood in my mouth. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I swear I see him standing behind me, watching, waiting, because the debt isn't paid. Not yet. I got a secret menu code from Burger King on the dark web. The burger they made wasn't made from meat. So, this happened about 3 months ago, and I'm still trying to process it. Like I'm not a paranormal guy or someone who believes in conspiracy theories. But after this, I'm starting to wonder if there's more to this world than I thought. Anyway, I figured I'd throw this story up here because Reddit feels like the only place where someone might actually take me seriously, or at least not call me insane outright. It started pretty normally. I'm a night owl, like full-on nocturnal. My job lets me work remote, so I'll finish up work at like 1 a.m. and then just scroll. You know how it is. YouTube rabbit holes, random subreddits, TikTok trends. I'll never try. But then I made a mistake. A stupid mistake. I don't know if you've ever explored the dark web. Not like real exploring. I'm talking about the stuff where you're just curious and use a Tor browser to poke around. My friends and I had joked about it in the past, and I always told myself, it's probably just boring forums and fake hitman services. You know, edgy nonsense. But curiosity got the better of me that night. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. After about 20 minutes of clicking through sketchy links, I found this weird forum called the Fry Vault. It looked old school, like a GeoCities page or something, with neon green text on a black background. The tagline at the top said, "For those who crave more than the menu." It was weird. People were posting about secret menu items at fast food chains, but it wasn't like the cool stuff you see on TikTok, like order an iced coffee with caramel and whipped cream and boom, secret drink. No, this was creepy. The threads were full of these cryptic codes like MACD G13 yellow or TB red deep 5. Some posts even had pictures of what looked like custom food items, burgers dyed black, tacos shaped like stars, and drinks that literally glowed. It all felt like an elaborate ARG or something. And then I saw it. BK, Oxblood 117. The post was from someone named Grillmaster 666. It said, for those looking to transcend the Whopper, use with caution, only at 24-hour locations. That's it. No instructions, no details, just a warning. Now listen, I know how stupid this sounds, but something about it hooked me. I was bored, and this was new. It felt like finding a secret level in a video game. I screenshotted the code, closed out the browser, and figured I'd give it a shot the next time I was near a Burger King. The opportunity came faster than I expected. The next night, I was hanging out with my buddy Mike. We'd just gotten done seeing some cheesy horror movie at the AMC and wanted a late-night snack. I remembered the code and casually brought it up. Dude, I said, have you ever heard of secret menu items at Burger King? Like some crazy dark web stuff? Mike laughed. What, like they're gonna give us a cursed Whopper or something? I shrugged. I mean, what's the harm in asking? There's a 24-hour BK about 10 minutes from here. Mike was always down for dumb adventures, so we drove over. The place was dead. No surprise for 2 a.m. The fluorescent lights buzzed as we walked in, and the air smelled like fryer oil and old grease. There was just one employee at the counter, a bored-looking guy in his 20s with a name tag that said Ryan. I walked up, trying not to sound like a total idiot. Hey, do you guys have like a secret menu? Ryan didn't even blink. Nah, man, just what's on the board. Okay, fair enough, but I wasn't done. What about OXBLOOD-117? As soon as I said it, Ryan's whole vibe changed. He froze, his hand gripping the edge of the counter so tight, his knuckles turned white. He stared at me like I'd just insulted his entire family. For a second, I thought he was going to tell us to leave, but then he muttered, "Wait here." He disappeared into the back. Mike and I exchanged a look. "What the hell did you just ask for?" he whispered. I shrugged. "I don't know, dude. It's probably just like a prank or something." We waited for what felt like forever. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The smell of grease was starting to make me nauseous. Finally, Ryan came back, holding a plain white paper bag. He slid it across the counter without a word. I picked it up. It felt heavier than I expected, like there was more than just a burger in there. "How much?" I asked, but Ryan just shook his head. "Don't tell anyone you got this," he said, his voice low and shaky. "And don't come back here. Ever." At this point, Mike was practically dragging me out the door. "Let's just go," he muttered. "This is freaking weird." We got back to the car, and I opened the bag. Inside was a black burger box. No logo, no branding, just matte black cardboard. I opened it, and I swear to God, I felt my stomach flip. The burger inside wasn't normal. The bun was dark red, almost brown, like it had been soaked in something. The patty looked like it had been ground up with bits of, I don't even know. It wasn't beef though. That much I could tell. The smell was metallic, like raw iron, mixed with something sour. There was no lettuce, no tomato, no pickles, just the meat, the bun, and a smear of some dark, sticky sauce. Mike leaned over and gagged. "Dude, that looks like roadkill. There's no way you're eating that." But I couldn't stop staring at it. There was something about it. Something wrong, but also intriguing. I mean, I'd come this far, right? I grabbed a napkin and tore off a small piece of the bun. Just the bun. No meat. I wasn't that reckless. I popped it into my mouth. It tasted like nothing. Literally nothing. No salt, no sweetness, no texture. Just this weird, empty sensation. like chewing on air. "Okay, you tried it. Now let's toss it and go home," Mike said. But as I looked closer at the burger, I noticed something sticking out from under the patty. It was small, shiny, and metallic. I grabbed a fork from the bag and lifted the patty, and that's when I saw it. So, under the patty, tucked into the blackened sauce and pressed into the bun like it had been cooked there, was a small key. Not like a house key or anything you'd find at Home Depot. It was old, tiny, almost ornamental, and rusted like something out of a horror movie. The weird part was the tag tied to it. It was a piece of greasy, curled paper with a single word written in shaky black ink: locker. I looked at Mike, holding up the key. "What the hell is this?" Mike backed away like I'd just found a live grenade. "Dude, put that back. Seriously, throw the whole thing away. This is next level messed up." I wanted to agree with him. My instincts were screaming at me to ditch the burger, the key, everything, and just go home. But you know how sometimes your brain just doesn't listen. It's like my curiosity had locked me into this, like a puzzle I had to solve. Why would a Burger King burger come with a key? What kind of locker was it for? And why did Ryan, the guy behind the counter, act like we'd just summoned a demon? "Relax," I said, slipping the key into my pocket. "It's probably just some dumb promotional thing. You know, like one of those treasure hunt ads or whatever. Maybe it's part of some viral marketing." Mike gave me a look that could have peeled paint off a wall. "Yeah, because Burger King's totally running some secret dark web scavenger hunt. Sounds legit." I didn't have a response to that, because honestly, he was right. But instead of tossing the key, I folded the burger box back up, stuck it in the bag, and shoved it under the passenger seat. My logic was, if this is some kind of prank or game, I want to see how far it goes. In hindsight, dumbest decision I've ever made. We drove back to my place, the whole car reeking of that burger. Mike didn't say much, just kept glancing nervously at the bag like it might start moving. When we finally pulled into my driveway, he turned to me and said, "Dude, I'm serious. Get rid of that thing. Toss it, burn it, whatever. This isn't funny anymore." I tried to laugh it off, but I could tell he wasn't joking. All right, I said. "I'll throw it out tomorrow." Mike didn't stick around. He mumbled something about having to be up early and practically bolted to his car. That should have been my second red flag. Mike's the kind of guy who'd stick around until sunrise if it meant more laughs. But something about that burger, about the key, had shaken him. After he left, I brought the bag inside and tossed it on the kitchen counter. I figured I'd deal with it in the morning, but as I sat down to watch Netflix and unwind, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about the key, about the word locker. What kind of locker? Where? And why did I feel like I needed to find out? I didn't sleep much that night. Around 3 a.m., I decided to do some digging. I grabbed my laptop and started Googling Burger King secret menu, Oxblood 117, and anything else I could think of. Most of it was just generic fast food conspiracy theories. Stuff like, did you know McDonald's fries have 17 chemicals? Nothing remotely useful. Then I remembered the dark web forum, the Fry Vault. I booted up the Tor browser and went back to the site, scrolling through pages of cryptic codes and grainy photos. That's when I found another post by Grillmaster 666. This one was titled, "What Happens When You Take the Key?" My stomach dropped as I clicked on it. The post was short, just a few lines of text. If you got a key, you've been chosen. The locker is your invitation. Location varies. Listen for the sound. Trust me, you'll know. And whatever you do, don't eat the meat. Not all burgers are made equal. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart racing. Listen for the sound. What the hell did that mean? And why did this feel less like a game and more like some twisted initiation? The next day, I decided to get rid of the burger. I figured I'd just throw it in the dumpster behind my apartment complex and forget the whole thing. But when I went to grab the bag off the counter, it was gone. I froze. I live alone. My door was locked all night, and there's no way Mike would have come back. I checked the trash, the fridge, even under the couch. Nothing. The burger, the box, the greasy bag. It had vanished. The only thing left was the key, still in my pocket. At this point, I was freaked out, but still trying to rationalize it. Maybe I'd thrown it out and forgotten. Maybe I was just overtired. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. That night, I was lying in bed, trying to convince myself to let it go, when I heard it. A faint, metallic clinking sound, like keys jingling. It was so quiet at first, I thought I was imagining it. But then it got louder, echoing through the apartment. It wasn't random either. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like someone was trying to get my attention. I sat up, heart pounding, and grabbed the key from my nightstand. As soon as I held it, the noise stopped. The next week was weird. Everywhere I went, I kept hearing the same metallic jingling. At work, at the grocery store, even in my car. It wasn't constant, but it always seemed to show up when I was alone. And every time it happened, I'd get this overwhelming urge to find the locker. I didn't know where it was or how to start looking, but it felt like the key was pulling me, like some invisible leash. The breaking point came one night when I was driving past an old strip mall about 15 minutes from my place. It was one of those creepy, half-abandoned spots where only a dollar store and a payday loan place are still open. As I passed, I heard the jingling again, louder than ever, and then, out of nowhere, my radio cut out. Dead silence. Then a voice crackled through the static, deep, distorted, and barely audible. "Stop!" I slammed on the brakes, heart in my throat. My headlights illuminated the parking lot, and that's when I saw it. A row of rusted lockers lined up against the side of an old laundromat. They shouldn't have been there. I'd driven past this place 100 times and never seen them before. But there they were, glinting in the moonlight, like they'd been waiting for me. I don't know why I got out of the car. Every rational part of me was screaming to turn around and floor it. But my legs moved on their own, carrying me across the lot toward the lockers. Each step felt heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on me. The lockers were covered in peeling paint and rust, but one stood out. It was pristine, almost new, with a small plaque on the door that read 117. My hands were shaking as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The door creaked open, revealing a plastic Burger King bag, just like the one I'd gotten days ago. I pulled it out, my stomach churning. It was heavier than before, and when I opened it, the smell hit me, like rotting meat and something metallic. Inside was another burger box, identical to the first, but this time there was no bun, no patty, just raw, dripping meat, and tucked into the meat was a piece of paper. 4 words, scrawled in blood-red ink. "Bring another, or die." I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that horrifying note, nestled in the raw, dripping meat. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Bring another, or die. It wasn't just a message, it was a demand. But what did they mean by bring another? Another burger? Another person? The smell of the meat was overwhelming. It wasn't just raw, it was wrong. It had this coppery, rancid tang that made my stomach churn. The meat didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. It wasn't ground beef, or chicken, or pork. It was something else. The texture was uneven, like it had been hacked apart with a dull blade. And then I saw something that almost made me drop the box. A small, jagged fragment of bone sticking out of the meat like a splinter. That's when I knew this wasn't some elaborate marketing stunt. This was something far worse. I slammed the locker shut and ran back to my car, the bag clutched tightly in my hand. My instincts were screaming at me to throw it out the window and never look back, but I couldn't. I knew deep down that whatever this was, it wasn't going to let me go that easily. The drive home was a blur. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. Every time I hit a red light, I felt like something was watching me. The jingling sound was back, faint at first, then louder, echoing in my ears like it was coming from inside my skull. When I finally got home, I locked all the doors and windows, drew the curtains, and sat at my kitchen table with the bag in front of me. My phone buzzed on the counter, and for a split second, I thought about calling the cops. But what was I supposed to tell them? That a Burger King burger came with a human meat puzzle and a death threat. They'd laugh me out of the station. I needed answers. I needed to know what the hell I was dealing with. Against every shred of common sense, I opened the box again and stared at the note. The handwriting was jagged and uneven, like whoever wrote it had been in a hurry, or wasn't fully human. The ink looked fresh, smeared in places like it hadn't dried yet. And the meat. God, the meat. The longer I looked at it, the more I noticed things I shouldn't have. Tiny dark shapes embedded in the flesh, like fingernails or fragments of teeth. My stomach lurched, and I had to fight the urge to vomit. I grabbed my laptop and started searching again, this time looking for anything related to human meat trafficking, secret societies, or even cannibalistic rituals. Most of it was the usual internet nonsense, urban legends, fake Reddit stories, and poorly written conspiracy theories. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a news article from 6 months ago about a missing Burger King employee in a small town 3 states over. The guy had disappeared during his shift, leaving his station mid-order and never coming back. The article mentioned strange rumors surrounding the case, whispers of a secret initiation for employees who stumbled upon something they weren't supposed to see. The police had ruled it a kidnapping, but no leads ever turned up. His name? Ryan, just like the guy who handed me the burger. I shut my laptop, breathing hard. This wasn't just some isolated prank. There was a pattern, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to something much bigger and much darker. The next couple of days were pure paranoia. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the bag sitting on my counter. Every time I tried to ignore it, the metallic jingling sound would start again, louder and more insistent. It was like the key was alive, taunting me, daring me to open the box again. By the 3rd night, I was completely unraveling. I started hearing whispers, faint but distinct, coming from the direction of the bag. They were low and garbled, like a voice underwater, but I could just make out fragments of words. Hungry. Another. Now. I knew I couldn't keep it in the house anymore. I grabbed the bag, stuffed it into a backpack, and drove to the nearest dumpster. The plan was simple: dump it, go home, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But as I walked up to the dumpster, I heard something that stopped me cold. It was the jingling sound again, coming from inside the dumpster. No, not inside, beneath it. Like something was buried under the concrete, clawing its way up. The sound grew louder, faster, more frantic, until I couldn't take it anymore. I dropped the bag, sprinted back to my car, and peeled out of there like my life depended on it. When I got home, I tried to convince myself it was over. I'd gotten rid of the bag. I'd done what it wanted. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The jingling was gone, but in its place was something worse. Silence. A heavy, oppressive silence that filled every corner of my apartment. It was like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Around midnight, I heard a knock at the door. Not a normal knock. This was slow and deliberate, like whoever was on the other side wanted me to know they weren't in a hurry. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Nobody knocks on your door at midnight unless it's bad news. The knocking stopped, but I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You didn't deliver." My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. Before I could respond, another text came through. "Bring another, or we'll come to you." That's when the smell hit me. That same rancid, metallic stench from the burger. It wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from inside my apartment. I turned around, and my stomach dropped. The bag was sitting on my kitchen counter, right where it had been before. I don't remember much after that. Just flashes. The bag, the box, the meat, the whispers. They were louder now, clearer, and I could finally make out what they were saying. "Feed us. Feed us. Feed us." I don't know why I did it, but I opened the box again. The meat was different this time. Fresher. Redder. It glistened under the light, and as much as I wanted to throw it out the window, I couldn't. My hands moved on their own, picking up the note. This time, there was something new scrawled beneath the original message. "Choose wisely. They're watching." Before I could process what that meant, my phone buzzed again. It was another text, this time with a picture. My blood turned to ice. It was a photo of Mike, tied to a chair, his face bruised and bloody. His eyes were wide with terror, and there was something behind him, a shadowy figure with long skeletal fingers resting on his shoulders. The message beneath the photo was short but clear. "Bring another, or he's next." I sat there staring at my phone, my breath caught in my throat. The image of Mike tied to that chair, helpless and bloody, was burned into my brain. That shadowy figure behind him. It wasn't human. It couldn't have been. Its fingers were too long, its shoulders hunched at unnatural angles, and its head tilted in a way that made me think it wasn't just staring at Mike. It was staring at me. Another text came through. "Time is running out." I wanted to scream, to throw my phone against the wall, to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. But I couldn't. I knew this wasn't a dream, and Mike was running out of time. And so was I. I tried to think, tried to come up with some kind of plan. I couldn't call the police. How would I even explain this? "Hi, yeah, I got a cursed burger from Burger King, and now my friend's being held hostage by some kind of demon." They'd hang up before I finished the sentence. The message was clear. I needed to bring another. But another what? Another person? Another burger? The note wasn't specific, but I had a sinking feeling I knew the answer. I spent the next hour pacing around my apartment, the box still sitting on the counter like it was mocking me. The smell of the meat had seeped into the air, thick and suffocating, and I couldn't escape it no matter where I went. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a text. It was a video. I didn't want to watch it. I shouldn't have watched it. But my finger hit play before my brain could stop me. The screen showed Mike, still tied to the chair. He was struggling against his restraints, his face streaked with tears and blood. "Please," he screamed. "Don't do this. I don't know anything." The camera panned to the shadowy figure behind him. It moved closer, its head dipping down until its face was inches from Mike's ear. I couldn't see its features, just the suggestion of hollow eyes and a mouth that stretched too wide. "Your friend is running out of time," it whispered, its voice a sickening mix of nails on a chalkboard and wet gravel. Then it turned to the camera, and I swear to God, it smiled. "Bring another, or he'll be ours." The video ended, and my phone buzzed again with another text. 2 hours. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed my jacket and the key and ran out the door. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. The air outside was freezing, but it did nothing to calm the fire in my chest. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. As I drove aimlessly through the city, my thoughts kept circling back to the word on the note, another. It didn't just mean a person, it meant a victim. That much was obvious. But who? How could I even do something like that? Could I really hand someone over to whatever this was just to save Mike? I pulled into a gas station parking lot and buried my face in my hands. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. People didn't just get kidnapped and threatened by shadow monsters over burgers. But then I remembered the smell, the meat, the key, the damn box that kept reappearing no matter how far I tried to throw it away. And Mike. I couldn't forget Mike. I lifted my head, and that's when I saw him. A homeless guy sitting on the curb by the gas station, huddled under a ratty blanket. He looked thin, frail, like he hadn't eaten in days. My stomach twisted. Number I couldn't. I wouldn't. But then my phone buzzed again. 1 hour. I looked at the guy again. He didn't even notice me. He was too busy picking through a trash can, pulling out scraps of whatever he could find. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I couldn't do this. I wasn't a killer. But if I didn't, Mike would die. Or worse. The jingling sound started again, faint but insistent. It was coming from my pocket, from the key. I pulled it out, and the moment I did, the homeless guy froze. He turned his head, slowly, and looked directly at me. "Hungry," he muttered, his voice cracked and dry. "So hungry." The key felt like it was burning in my hand. I don't remember making the decision, but the next thing I knew, I was out of the car, walking toward him. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. "Hey," I said, my voice shaky. "Are you hungry?" He nodded, his eyes wide and hollow. Yeah, man. You got something?" I hesitated, my mind screaming at me to stop, to turn around and run. But instead, I said, There's a place I know. They're giving out free meals. I can take you there." He looked at me like I'd just told him he'd won the lottery. "Really? Man, you don't know what that means. Thank you. Thank you." The drive back to the strip mall was the longest 30 minutes of my life. The homeless guy, his name was Carl, kept thanking me. talking about how he hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. I nodded along, barely hearing him. My hands were trembling on the wheel, and the jingling sound had grown louder, filling the car like some kind of horrific countdown. When we pulled into the parking lot, the lockers were still there, gleaming under the flickering streetlights. Carl looked confused. This the place? Yeah, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. They keep the meals in the lockers. It's a program thing. He looked skeptical, but didn't argue. Hunger does that to people, I guess. I led him to the locker, 117, and unlocked it with the key. The door creaked open, revealing the same white Burger King bag I'd seen before. But this time, the bag was moving. Something inside it was moving. Carl hesitated. What's in there? I stepped back, my heart pounding in my ears. Just take it. It's yours. He reached into the locker and grabbed the bag, his hands trembling. As he opened it, the smell hit both of us like a wave. It was worse than before. Rotten, sour, metallic. Carl gagged, dropping the bag. And that's when it happened. The shadow came out of nowhere, surging forward like smoke, like liquid, like something that didn't belong in this world. It wrapped around Carl, dragging him into the locker with a force that made the metal door groan. He screamed, a high, shrill sound that cut through the night like a knife. But it didn't last long. The door slammed shut, and the scream stopped. The jingling sound was gone. The silence was deafening. I staggered back to my car, shaking so hard I could barely get the door open. My phone buzzed again, and I almost didn't want to look. But I had to. It was a text. One word. Delivered. And then, a picture. It was Mike, untied and unharmed, sitting on the side of the road near his car. He looked confused, but alive. I broke down, sobbing, a mix of relief and guilt tearing through me like a hurricane. I'd saved him, but at what cost? When I got home, the key was gone. The box was gone. Everything was gone, except for the smell. That goddamn smell. It's still in my apartment, no matter how much I clean, no matter how many candles I burn. And every night, I hear the same words, whispered in the darkness. Bring another. I thought it was over. I told myself I had done what they wanted. I'd brought another. I'd delivered. Mike was safe, and the nightmare was supposed to end. That's how these things go in movies, right? You do the unthinkable, you make it out alive, and you spend the rest of your life trying to forget. But this wasn't a movie, and this nightmare didn't end. The first few days were quiet. Too quiet. Mike called me the morning after, confused, but unharmed. He didn't remember much, just being grabbed outside his apartment by a bunch of guys in masks and waking up on the side of the road. I didn't tell him what really happened. How could I? Hey man, sorry I almost got you killed by some shadow demon because I ordered a cursed burger off the dark web. Yeah, no. I just told him I was glad he was okay and left it at that. But the silence? It didn't last. The first sign was the smell. That awful, rancid, metallic stench that clung to everything. It came back the second night, stronger than before. I scrubbed my apartment from top to bottom, emptied the trash, even poured bleach down the sink. Nothing helped. It was like the smell wasn't in the apartment. It was part of it. The next night, I started hearing the whispers again. They came from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Faint at first, but they grew louder with each passing hour. I could barely make out what they were saying, but the tone was unmistakable, mocking, taunting, like they knew something I didn't. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Carl's face. his wide, terrified eyes as the shadow dragged him into the locker, his scream cutting off like someone had flipped a switch. And then I'd see something else, something worse. The bag, the box, the meat, and the figure behind it all. On the fifth night, I woke up to a sound that made my blood turn to ice. It was the jingle, that same metallic sound, faint but deliberate, echoing from somewhere inside my apartment. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, scanning the room. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst, but I didn't see anything, just shadows. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look. I knew what it would be, but I couldn't stop myself. The screen lit up with a text from an unknown number. "You're not done." My stomach dropped. Another text came through, this one with an address. It was a location about 20 minutes away, a storage facility on the outskirts of town. Beneath the address were 2 words, "Bring another." I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen. My mind was screaming at me to ignore it, to smash my phone, to run as far and as fast as I could. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd find me, just like they'd found Carl, just like they'd found Mike. I didn't have a choice. I grabbed my jacket, my car keys, and a flashlight. This time, there was no key, no bag, just the address and the overwhelming sense that I was walking into something I couldn't escape. The storage facility was massive, a sprawling maze of identical units stretching into the darkness. The air was cold and still, the kind of silence that feels alive. I parked near the entrance and stepped out, clutching the flashlight like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The address led me to Unit 171. The number was painted in faded black letters on the metal door. As I approached, I felt it again, that oppressive, suffocating presence. The same one I'd felt at the locker, the same one I'd felt when I opened the box. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the latch. My phone buzzed again. Another text. "Open it." My heart felt like it was going to explode. I reached for the latch and pulled it up. The door groaned as it rolled open, revealing the interior. At first, I thought the unit was empty. The flashlight's beam swept over bare concrete walls and a dusty floor. But then I saw it. In the center of the room, there was a table, and on the table was another box, the same black, unmarked box. I didn't want to go near it, but my legs moved on their own, carrying me forward. The smell hit me before I even touched the box, rotten, metallic, and somehow alive. My hands were shaking as I lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of photos, dozens of them, all taken in the same dimly lit room. The first photo was of Carl, sitting at a table with that same cursed burger in front of him. His eyes were wide with fear, his hands trembling as he reached for the bun. The next photo showed him mid-bite, blood dribbling from his mouth. The one after that, I can't even describe it. His face was twisted, his skin pale and stretched tight over his bones. His eyes were gone, replaced with dark, empty sockets, and his mouth, it was smiling. I dropped the photos, my stomach churning. That's when I noticed the last thing in the box, a note. It was written in the same jagged handwriting as before, but this time, it wasn't a threat. It was instructions. Find another, bring them here, or you'll take their place. I drove home in a daze, the words replaying in my mind over and over. Bring another, or take their place. The choice was clear, but the weight of it was crushing. How could I do this again? How could I live with myself, knowing what I'd done to Carl, knowing what I might do to someone else? But the whispers didn't care. The jingle didn't care. They were relentless, gnawing away at my sanity with every passing second. It's been 3 days since I found the box. The smell is back, stronger than ever, and the whispers have become a constant chorus in my ears. I can't eat, I can't sleep, and every time I close my eyes, I see their faces, Carl's, Mike's, and now my own. I've tried to fight it, tried to ignore the demands, but it's no use. They won't let me go. They never planned to. So here I am, sitting in my car outside a McDonald's parking lot, watching people come and go. I feel like a predator, stalking my prey. My hands are trembling, my stomach is in knots, and my mind is screaming at me to stop. But I know I won't. I don't have a choice. The box is in the passenger seat, waiting. The whispers are louder now, cheering me on, urging me forward. The jingle is back, a sickening soundtrack to my descent into something I never thought I'd become. And the worst part? I'm starting to understand it. The hunger, the need, the craving. The next time you hear about someone going missing, think of me. Think of the story. And if you ever find yourself in a Burger King at 2 a.m. and someone whispers a code to you, OXBLOOD117, do yourself a favor. Run, and don't look back.